Today we got to talk about one of the more surprising teams in the NFL, one that continued to be good and still proved that they got it. I'm talking about the Buffalo Bills. We're going to talk about where I had them in August, what happened with their season, what went right with it, and we're going to talk about how they can get better. But before we begin officially, all right, and welcome in everybody. Hope you're having a fantastic, fantabulous, awesome freaking day. My name is Garrett Shumake, and you are listening to the Shumake Take. Welcome in to Predictions versus Reality. The offseason series is beginning to wrap up as we approach free agency. Very, very close. And today we're going to be talking about, once again, the Buffalo Bills, the first place team in the AFC East, and a team that surprised a lot of people. This bunch, I don't think people expected for them to take the step forward that they did. Most people thought that they would be taking a step backward, including myself. And then before we know it, they were the second seed in the AFC. But before we begin officially, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button if you're brand new here around the channel, or if you enjoy the content that I make for you guys every single week. I would greatly appreciate it if you guys would do that. Helps me continue to spread my football passion to more and more people on the platform. Without further ado, let's begin with the Buffalo Bills. Where did I have this team in August? I had this team going 10-7. I was one of the few people, like I mentioned, or not few, I was one of many people, like I mentioned, had this team taking a step backward. Although at the same time, it wasn't going to be this massive step backwards. Honestly, 10-7 felt safe here because the roster simply just was not as good on paper as in previous years. The wide receiver situation looked bad. The secondary looked worse after losing Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. Along with that, and you look at the team I had in first place, the New York Jets. At the time, I looked at their roster and I was like, yeah, they got a lot of improvements here. Their roster's better. And yeah, I can see the Jets taking first place with the Bills finishing second. That being said, I also mentioned that Josh Allen would will this team into the postseason. I still had this team as a playoff team because with Josh Allen at quarterback, they are going to be a playoff team guaranteed every single year until it is not the case. Along with that, I also mentioned that he would also cover up a lot of these teams' issues and that they were still going to be a good team, just not as good as before. Boy, was I wrong about this one as well. Moving on to what happened with their season. Well, they didn't finish 10-7. They exceeded expectations, finishing the second seed in the AFC with a 13-4 record. Wow. This team, not only did they win 13 games, they won them, a lot of them, in very solid fashion, if not dominant fashion. They did not have very many games where they were tight, close fought, and it looked like the Bills were vulnerable per se. There was a couple there at the end of the year with like the Rams and with the Lions, but we'll hint on that here at the end here when it's time for it. But overall, this Bills team was a very, very dominant unit for the most part. Their offense finished 10th, their defense finished 17th, and their three best wins, in my opinion, were against Jacksonville. They beat them 47-10. They beat Kansas City 31-21 to give them their first loss of the year, which is, in my opinion, probably their absolute best win of the year. And then their second best for sure was at Detroit, where they won 48-42 in one of the biggest games and one of the best games of the year, in my opinion. This season for Buffalo started off a little bit iffy. I shouldn't say iffy. Iffy is a little bit more of an exaggeration. But the first 3 weeks, they were dominating their opponents. Well, week 1 against Arizona was a one-score game. But their offense, despite all the issues at wide receiver, right? People still had questions about James Cook. Their offense was clicking. And then they went on a 3-0. They started the year 3-0. They looked insane. And then they got blown out by Baltimore in week 4. Lost a close one to Houston in week 5. And then people were like, including myself, okay, the Bills are back down to earth. Maybe 10-7 is a little bit more plausible here. And then they went on a wild winning streak, which included that Kansas City win. And then they lost their next game a couple weeks after that. And then they lost week 18 against New England, where they were resting most of their starters. So most of the year, they were dominant and performing really, really well. And you get into the wild card round, you beat up on Denver, go into the divisional round, go toe-to-toe with Baltimore and hold on to get the win at the end. Mark Andrews dropped the 2-point conversion. Of course, that would have tied it if we remember. And then going into the AFC Championship, they had a lead and they had a chance to put that game away. Unfortunately, they just could not get out of their own way. But we're here to talk about what went right with the Buffalo Bills. We don't necessarily need to talk about the playoffs because what happened in the playoffs is what always happens with Buffalo, and the narrative and the conversation about that part of the team and about that like concept, none of that's really changed. So I'm not really going to talk about it. That's just a little bit of a disclaimer. But what went right with Buffalo? So the first thing that went right was the offense popped off, and I got to give credit to offensive coordinator Joe Brady. This guy took an offense that was supposed to take a step back on paper and ended up being one of the better statistical units the Buffalo Bills have ever had on offense historically. I mean, the first team in NFL history to have 30 passing touchdowns and 30 rushing touchdowns in one season. They were absolutely magnificent to watch, for lack of a better word. But talking about the specific things that went right in this offense, more peculiarly, first off, we got to talk about the wide receivers. The part that I thought would really hold this team back, honestly, was utilized pretty darn well, which is also a credit to Joe Brady, because despite the lack of overall talent at the receiver position for Buffalo, guess what? He had a scheme that not only utilized every single player to the best of their ability, but also knew when to use them as well. So you had an offense that was very much efficient. And you look at Khalil Shakir, who's a guy I've really grown to love over the course of this year, had a great year, received a 4-year, $53 million extension. So congratulations to you, Mr. Shakir. Guys like Mac Hollins and Curtis Samuel seem to always have a big play up their sleeve. Rookie Keon Coleman, the second rounder out of FSU, while he was quiet, showed some good things and showed some promise. I'm looking forward to seeing him next year in year 2. And then lastly, the trade for Amari Cooper mid-season helped give a demanding presence that really helped everyone else do better. Even though he wasn't his dominant usual self because he's in his 30s, he's slowing down, Amari Cooper was a nice added piece for a reliable veteran receiver in that group. The third thing that went right was Josh Allen. Josh Allen winning the MVP, having one of the best seasons of his career. He's another example of when you have consistency in the NFL, in your organization, when it comes to developing your quarterback, you're going to have success because he's had the same head coach the entire time. Has he had that same coach the entire time? I don't think he has. But either way, Sean McDermott's been there the majority of his career. That being said, the offensive coordinators, he's only had a couple ever since he's been in the NFL. You look at quarterback coaches, haven't moved all that much. And when you have it, and that consistency, when you have that consistency for a quarterback and their development, it does so much good. Not just for the quarterback, but for the entire organization, because the organization revolves around the quarterback. Along with that, James Cook took a big step forward. He had over 1,000 yards, had 16 touchdowns, and quite frankly, really helped this passing game, help take some of the pressure off. The Bills have normally never had a great running game, per se. They've always relied on their passing game, but this year, with the emergence of James Cook, and of course, guys like Ty Johnson, Ray Davis in the backfield, that whole committee, and then Josh Allen, of course, being a scrambler that he is, the running game had a big point of emphasis this year for Buffalo, and it worked really, really well. And like I mentioned, it helped take the pressure off this receiver group. It helped them perform better because of it. But the group that really put all this together was the fifth thing that went right, the big boys up front. I'm talking about the offensive line. This offensive line was insane for Buffalo this year. They were top 5 in almost every popular and advanced metric you can look at. They were dominant in every game. You look at the tape, Josh Allen constantly had a bunch of time in the pocket to throw the ball. Receivers were constantly getting open. When a play broke down, almost always there was a receiver open. Why? Because his offensive line was one of the best pass blocking units in the NFL. They bought so much time and gave Josh Allen, James Cook, and these receivers so much help to allow them to do what they need to do to go win the game. And when you have an elite offensive line and you pair that with an elite quarterback, when you don't have elite weapons, that's okay. Because the core pieces of the offense, your offensive line and your quarterback, are elite and they're there. And so everything else kind of gets elevated around that when things go right. And everything for this offense went right. So big shout out to the offense here for all that they've done this year, which the unit I thought would take a step back guess what? They were one of the best in the NFL this year. They were so much fun to watch. But it wasn't just this offense that shined. This defense also shined despite their 17th ranking. So, despite the losses that they had in the secondary, this was still a very solid unit. Yes, they were bottom 10 in pass defense, and they were bottom 5 on third down. But also, you look at that on the flip side, they had 13 games where they allowed 21 points or less, and they also had a really good run defense. And ultimately, outside of like the Rams game and the Lions game, they really didn't hold their team back, which usually when you see a team that's in the bottom in the NFL in third down and pass defense, usually that is a killer. That is usually a killer, but because of how sound and solid they played the rest of the time, they were able to overcome it. They were an above average, solid unit that quite frankly never got in the offense's way, never got in their own way. They were clean, efficient, effective. And that's what you really, really want at a baseline for your defense. And now you just got to add to it. And now we can start talking about the Buffalo Bills defense being back into that elite core, elite category / tier that they were in not too long ago before this. Along with that, let me see, Matt Milano, having him back was also a big help to this defense. And then Terrell Bernard, the middle linebacker, had a good year, and he actually just signed a 4-year, $50 million extension. Congratulations to you, Mr. Bernard. He was also one of 2 team captains on the team, showing how good of a player and how committed of a player he is, and how much the players and coaches on his team love him to be picked as one of 2 captains to run, or not to run, but to lead this team. So now with the Buffalo Bills, we talk about what happened with their season, what went right with it. How can they make a step forward and get better? Well, the Bills are a team that's always going to be in the mix to start off, but they're really going to need to focus on drafting and developing in order to stay competitive because their cap situation is not great. Right now, they're negative $8 million. They're $8 million over the salary cap, which is not too hard. I mean, you can cut like a player here, cut a player there, and then, well, bam, you have the space. But even then, you got to cut a little bit more players, restructure a deal there, and that way you can free up to bring in free agents and also sign your draft picks. But to me, the big 3 all have to be addressed in the draft early, and that's corner, defensive tackle, wide receiver. I'd probably flip-flopped wide receiver and defensive tackle, but honestly, they're kind of interchangeable to me. The first one, obviously, cornerback. That's by far their biggest need. Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford, they were okay. They were not great. I think they both would have been fine with another year of development, but I think which one of them? I think Rasul Douglas is going to be a free agent. And then also in the back end, safety DeMar Hamlin is set to be a free agent. So there's going to be some holes left there to fill regardless. But also, they just need a solid upgrade. I'm expecting them to draft a corner with their first round pick. They're picking at the bottom of the first round, which is where the cornerback prospects are ranked. Maybe you trade down into the second like you did last year to pick Keon Coleman, and maybe you take a flyer on a corner that was arguably a first round talent. So you could do that, acquire more picks. It's worked for Buffalo before. I expect them to, or I shouldn't expect them, but I can see them doing this same move again. That being said, their second biggest need is defensive tackle. Ed Oliver's a really good player, but Daquan Jones, the veteran next to him, is getting older. I don't think he's a free agent, but you really need to add depth there and just add a player that can really just pair with Ed Oliver and be set for the next 3, 4, 5 years, right? You want to lock in that position with 2 young, really strong, powerful, effective defensive tackles, because something that the Eagles proved is that defensive tackle pressure is so much more important to an NFL defense than just edge rushers. You need pressure from all 4 guys, and adding another good interior defensive lineman there to pair with Ed Oliver, there you go. You have potentially have a solid to really, really good unit with those 2 guys in the middle, whoever you draft with your pick to get a defensive tackle. A little bit of shaky there at the end, but hey, we're moving on. The next one is wide receiver. I know they just locked down Khalil Shakir, but Curtis Samuel, Mac Hollins, Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper's a free agent. Curtis Samuel and Mac Hollins, I think, are going to stay. I think they have 1 more year left on their deals, but these guys aren't permanent options, right? And then Keon Coleman, of course, he's a second-round pick, but I would really like them to see to draft another young wide receiver. They don't have to start right away, because like I said, I think Mac Hollins and Curtis Samuel stay, I think. They might be free agents. I'm not 100% on that. Bills fans, let me know in the comments if I'm right or wrong about that. Anyways, drafting another young receiver to pair with Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir would be really nice because now you have a young receiver from the 2022 draft, a young receiver from the 2024 draft, and now you can get one in 2025. And so now you have a good young trio that can really run this offense along with James Cook and Josh Allen for years. So getting a receiver there young will be really, really important for them to continue to have success in the passing game with all the veterans that are on the group that will be leaving within a year or two. So I already mentioned with the Bills that a team they're all going to be in the mix. And while Josh Allen is still there, and if things go right for them in the offseason, I expect this team to be in the Super Bowl conversation like they have most of the time. If they can just improve the offense a little bit more and really improve and add good pieces to this defense, we could really see a real possibility that they finally make it there. But they got to figure out how to get out of their own way in the playoffs. They do it every single year and find a way to just randomly blow it when they and do an uncharacteristic mistake. It's just like Baltimore. These two teams are literally right next to each other in that narrative, and then there's Kansas City at the top. But like I mentioned with Baltimore, Kansas City is probably going to face a down year. I'm looking at that potentially being one, and if there's any year for it to happen, this would be the year. So just like Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, how 2025 could be their year, it very also much well could be Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills year as well if things go right for them. While their margin for error is a little bit thinner than Baltimore, like I said, I still expect them to be in the playoffs. I still expect them to be in the Super Bowl conversation until they take the step back that declares that they are not. But that being said, that is going to do it for me today for the Buffalo Bills. Make sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. All Bills Mafia, I want to hear your thoughts. Who do you want them to draft in the first round? Who do you want to go get in free agency? Do you think Buffalo can make the Super Bowl in 2025? Also, make sure to hit the like button and the subscribe button if you're new around here on the channel. Helps the channel out a ton, helps me out a ton, and continuing to help grow and spread my football passion to more and more people on this platform. Also, make sure you guys are sharing the video, whether by word of mouth or social media, getting everybody locked in and locked on to the Shumake Take podcast. I'm coming out with great content for you guys every single week. And next week, we're going to be talking about free agency. And I want to make a little bit of a disclaimer here, probably too late for this, but I'll say it anyways. So, as I talk about news, as predictions versus reality videos continue dropping, there's going to be some news that breaks that might be outdated from when a video comes out. So if I drop a video and then news comes out afterward and it's not in the video, I didn't leave it out. It's just news is constantly dropping all the time, and me being slightly behind on predictions versus reality is not helping with that. But with that being said, hope you guys have enjoyed. The AFC East is done. We move on to the AFC West. And for then, I will see you all next time.